My name is Maria Dolphin, and I'm about to turn 27. I've been married for 5 years and have a 4-year-old son named Martin. At first, I worked full-time, but now I work part-time at the same company. My husband is 30 years old, 3 years older than me. Kevin Carlton, who I married, seemed sweet when we were dating, but things changed after marriage. He became more controlling. Kevin has a 20-year-old sister named Jane Dalton, and he spoils her a lot, maybe because of their big age gap. Before we got married, I didn't really mind how close Jane and Kevin were. But after tying the knot, I started noticing some changes. Jane frequently drops by our place, and I end up scrambling to cater to her every whim because Kevin always caves into her demands. She shows up unannounced, morning or night, without bringing any gifts or even a thank you. She acts like I'm invisible, only talking to Kevin, saying, "Hey brother, I'm here again." Kevin, oblivious to the fact that I didn't prepare dinner for Jane, asks if she wants to eat. When I try to discreetly mention it to Kevin, he brushes it off, leaving me to serve my own dinner to Jane in the end. Then, loud enough for Jane to hear, he blames me, saying things like, "You should have made more food." Jane looks like she's going to cry and apologizes to me. Kevin comforts her and scolds me, saying things like, "You're not considerate," or "Don't be mean to my sister." Even though Jane apologizes, it's clear she feels reassured by how Kevin takes her side. It's like she enjoys it. I end up making my own meal from leftovers while they eat together. Just as I'm about to join them, Jane tells Kevin she wants to talk alone. Kevin moves me and Martin to another room. This isn't the first time. After we finish eating and clean up, I find them chatting on the sofa. They never bothered to clean up after themselves. It feels like they see me as a maid, not a wife or sister-in-law. They don't even talk to Martin. It's like I'm just a maid bringing my kid to work. I was tidying up the kitchen and getting ready to bathe Martin when Kevin suddenly called me, even though it was almost 8 p.m. He said, "Jane wants cake. Go buy it now. Get it from the shop by the station," telling me exactly where to go. But going out to buy cake would make Martin go to bed late. When I hesitated, Jane insisted, "I want it now," and Kevin rushed me, saying, "It's fine if he stays up a bit longer tonight." Then Kevin started yelling at me, blaming me for having an attitude with Jane around. I knew I'd have to go to the cake shop eventually, so I reluctantly agreed. There's a cake shop near the station that closes at 9 p.m. So if I hurry, I can make it. As I was getting ready to go, I overheard them talking, speaking loudly enough for me to hear. They were saying things like, "She's so thoughtless," and "Why did you marry her?" Since I couldn't leave Martin alone, I decided to take him with me. While I was getting Martin ready, I heard Kevin's loud voice from the living room. "If you defy me again, we'll get a divorce." Martin could hear it too. He might not understand the words, but I think he knows his parents are fighting. Trying to control my emotions, I asked Martin, "What kind of cake would you like?" He perked up and said, "Mom, I want a cake with lots of fruits." So on our way to the cake shop, we chatted about cakes, momentarily forgetting about Kevin's words. We made it to the cake shop just before it closed. Luckily, they had the cake Jane wanted. We bought 2 cakes and the fruit-loaded cake Martin desired. When we got back home, I served the cakes to Jane and Kevin. I prepared Martin's cake and brought it to the dining room. As soon as I set it down in front of Martin, Jane pointed at it and said, "Actually, I want that cake." Before I could respond, Kevin moved Martin's cake in front of Jane. Ignoring Martin's protests, Jane started eating his cake. Kevin justified it by saying, "I bought that cake with my money, so I get to choose." Unable to contain my emotions any longer, I expressed my frustration to Kevin and Jane. Kevin then threatened, "We could get a divorce, you know." Martin stopped crying but held my hand tightly, looking worried. Then, after a moment, Martin said, "Mom, I also love cake with strawberries. It's really yummy." He mentioned it while eating the cake that Jane initially wanted. I feel like I'm putting Martin through too much. 3 adults, myself included, shouldn't be subjecting a 4-year-old child to this. When I saw Jane reaching for Martin's cake, I swiftly moved his plate away. Martin happily followed me to another room, saying, "Yummy, let's go over here." Probably Kevin noticed Jane's attempt too. He apologized to her, saying, "Sorry for being so tight-fisted." I wanted to respond, but I held back, not wanting to expose Martin to the word divorce. Seeing Martin innocently enjoying his cake is heartwarming. After he finished, ignoring Kevin and Jane, We decided to have a late bath and sleep in Martin's bed. The next morning, I woke up to find Jane had already left. I was about to wake up Kevin and Martin and make breakfast when I heard Martin crying. I rushed to him to find his piggy bank, a gift from my father, broken, and all his saved money gone. It was Martin's nightly ritual to bid good night to his piggy bank before going to sleep. Last night was no exception. He said good night to it and cuddled up with me. At that time, only Kevin and Jane were in the living room. I asked Kevin about the piggy bank. He responded casually, saying that Jane needed some money, so she took it from Martin's piggy bank. Martin was still crying as I held him close. His pain was so palpable that it brought tears to my eyes. It was agonizing to see Kevin prioritize and cater to his sister Jane over our son Martin. Anger and sadness flooded over me simultaneously. "Why are you making a morning so miserable?" Kevin retorted. "Don't you think you did something wrong? Martin is crying so much." For the first time since we got married, I let my anger out towards him. I had always avoided arguing in front of Martin, but I couldn't stay silent seeing him so hurt. Kevin looked at me intensely, then went to the bedroom without saying a word, returning with something in his hand. To my shock, Kevin handed me divorce papers, something I didn't even know he had stashed away. "If you're not happy with me, then let's get a divorce," he declared, thrusting the papers at me before storming out of the house with a loud slam of the door. Martin, who had never shed tears over the issues with Kevin and Jane, seemed to have reached his breaking point. He had been crying since last night, and it broke my heart to see him in such pain. "Hey Martin, how about we skip daycare today?" I suggested, hoping to bring him some comfort. He eagerly agreed with a loud yes, flashing me a faint smile. As Martin brought a picture book from the shelf and settled onto my lap, he looked up at me with joy and asked, "Today Mama is the teacher at daycare, right?" His innocence was like a ray of sunshine. I couldn't help but marvel at his resilience. Today, I decided that we would spend the day playing and cherishing each moment together to fill his heart with happiness. I might be causing some inconvenience at work, but when I explained the situation, they kindly granted me a day off, advising me to spend quality time with Martin. In the morning, we headed to the park, played games like hide and seek, and had a blast on the swings and slides. Upon returning home for lunch, Martin seemed tired and soon dozed off on my lap, just like he used to when he was a baby. Normally, I would use this time to catch up on chores. But today felt different, so I decided to cherish the moment and enjoy watching him sleep peacefully. As I started to drift off myself, I was startled by a noise from the front door. It was too early for Kevin to be back, so I felt uneasy. Quickly, I scooped up Martin, and grabbing only my bag with essentials, I hurriedly hid with him in the bedroom closet. I froze as I sensed someone entering the house, holding my breath as I heard a familiar voice. The person seemed to be searching for something, muttering, "I can't find it." Where did the wife hide it? Fear gripped me as I listened to the sound of rummaging, but as I focused on the voice, I recognized it. It was Jane. Questions flooded my mind. Why did she have a key? What was she searching for? I cautiously cracked open the closet door to see what she was up to. She was rifling through drawers and cabinets, then let out a frustrated sigh before making a phone call. "I searched where you said, but it's not there." "Yeah, I checked there too. If it's not there, it's a waste of time." "Okay, got it. Heading home now," she said, mentioning Kevin's name. Kevin? I wondered what they were searching for. I heard the front door lock, and when it was safe, I put Martin to bed and pondered the strange events. I was certain Kevin was involved in whatever they were looking for. If they were searching for something unknown, could it be one of my possessions? Despite their earlier conversation, I couldn't decipher why Jane had suddenly appeared at our house. Kevin felt like a stranger to me, and I was overcome with a mix of disgust and fear towards him. Hastily, I packed the essentials for Martin and myself. By the time Martin woke from his nap, I was ready to leave. "Martin, let's go to Grandpa's house," I said, and we made our way to the station, catching a train to my parents' home. Thankfully, it was just 2 stops away, so we arrived swiftly. Since I hadn't informed them beforehand, my parents were surprised, but they sensed something was wrong and welcomed us without prying. Their dog, a favorite of Martin's, greeted him eagerly, and they began playing together. Watching them, I felt a sense of relief and proceeded to recount everything that had happened with Kevin and Jane. "Perhaps Jane was searching for your bank cards," my mother suggested. It made sense. Before getting married, I had founded a successful online shop for handmade goods with friends. As the CEO of the handmade industry, I gained recognition, but when the shop flourished, I decided to focus on raising my child. I've entrusted my company to trusted friends while I focus on raising my child. I work part-time and handle most tasks from home. Though I'm still the CEO, Kevin is unaware of this. He knows about my previous role and likely suspects I have savings. I've informed him that I receive assistance from the company but left out the CEO details, letting him assume I stepped down. I haven't disclosed the full extent of my CEO position or savings to Kevin for a reason. Shortly after our marriage, I discovered his poor money management skills. He spends everything he earns. He allocates only $200 monthly for food expenses and suggested I quit my job to be a full-time housewife. An idea I never agreed to, given the financial strain of such a small allowance. After some persuasion, he reluctantly agreed to let me work part-time at my current company. To ensure I wouldn't consider divorce, he even had me sign a postmarital property waiver with a lawyer. Since Martin's birth, I've been allotted only $200 for food expenses. Consequently, I've been using my savings to cover Martin's nursery fees and clothing expenses. I've refrained from asking Kevin for money beyond the food budget, leading him to assume I have substantial savings. Jane appears to be in dire need of money, and with Kevin's belief in my savings, they may be searching for my cash cards. It all makes sense now. I maintain a separate savings account dedicated to slowly accumulating funds for Martin's future. A portion of my salary is automatically deposited into this account each month. Given their financial circumstances, it's highly likely they are seeking my cash cards. No matter how hard Jane or Kevin search, they won't find my valuables because I always keep them close, including my cash cards. However, there's still an unresolved issue. Jane might be entering our house even when we're not there, possibly with Kevin's knowledge. Following my father's advice, I decided to store my valuables in my parents' safe. Why are they so desperate for money? As I pondered this question, Martin tearfully approached my father, explaining that his piggy bank had been broken, and he couldn't keep his promise to save up. My father's face flushed with anger upon hearing Martin's story. "I'll call Kevin and talk to him," my mother suggested. While chiding my father, "Let's find out their motives." She reasoned that since Kevin had mentioned divorce, he might try to blame us and make the divorce more favorable for himself. Therefore, it's essential to calmly uncover their motives now to prevent them from escaping with excuses later on. I decided to secretly record their conversation to uncover their motives. My parents suggested consulting a lawyer who was a longtime family friend. Once back home, I started cooking dinner as usual when Kevin returned. I discreetly began recording on my phone, keeping the screen face down to avoid detection. To my surprise, Kevin immediately asked me where I kept my cash cards. When I questioned his sudden interest, he provided vague answers, attempting to deceive me. Remaining silent, I watched as Kevin's demeanor shifted to one of numbness and sadness. "Give me all your part-time earnings for my sister," he demanded, but I refused, explaining that the money was for Martin's savings. This enraged Kevin, who then angrily pushed divorce papers toward me from his bag. "You're relying on my money, so don't defy me," he retorted, dismissing the importance of saving for Martin. His words implied a greater value placed on Jane over Martin, leaving me stunned and disheartened. Upon hearing Kevin's words, I halted my meal preparations, calmly placed the divorce papers into the bag I had prepared earlier, and grasped Martin's hand, leading him to the door. Kevin's voice boomed behind us, declaring, "I'm serious about the divorce. Don't ever return." In response, I asserted, "I won't return to a home where anyone can come and go as they please," before departing. Was it too harsh to label my sister-in-law as a stranger? Following my departure, I was bombarded with messages and calls from Kevin, all of which I chose to ignore. I powered off my phone and sought refuge at my parents' house. There, I played the recording of Kevin's conversation and showed them the completed divorce papers. My parents simply advised, "Do as you see fit." I didn't harbor any love or affection for Kevin, but I still cared deeply for Martin. Some advised me to divorce Kevin to spare Martin's feelings, but I feared that divorcing could also hurt Martin. Amidst this inner turmoil, Martin voiced his hunger, prompting my mother to whip up his favorite dish, hamburgers. Tears welled up in my eyes as my mother, with a gentle smile, said to Martin, "I made these hamburgers so you and Mom can visit us anytime." After taking a bite, Martin beamed and exclaimed, "Grandma's hamburgers are the best. I want them every day," his joyful words tugging on heartstrings. I replied, "It's because these hamburgers are made with all the love I have for you," as he sweetly fed me a bite. Overwhelmed by his kindness, tears streamed down my cheeks uncontrollably. I tried to suppress them, but they kept flowing. My father reassured Martin, who was alarmed by my tears, saying, "Mommy is crying because she's so happy you gave her this hamburger." "These are tears of joy, not sadness," he explained tenderly. Martin, in his innocence, remarked, "This hamburger is so yummy. If Jane were here, she'd love it too." Hearing this, I couldn't hold back my tears, and I embraced him tightly, while my father's eyes filled with emotion. Turning to Martin, I said, "Being with family is a blessing, isn't it?" He looked puzzled and asked, "Didn't Dad say only Jane is family? Is my family just Mom, Grandpa, and Grandma?" My father responded gently, "Yes, that's right," then asked Martin, "Would you like to stay here with us as family?" Martin chuckled and replied, "Of course. We're family," bringing smiles to everyone's faces. When was the last time we had such a natural meal? When did we last enjoy a meal filled with endless laughter and conversation? Despite contemplating divorce, the happiness of this meal persuaded me to finally part ways with Kevin. I planned to break the news to Martin, though the thought weighed heavily on my heart. Surprisingly, Martin seemed to understand and embrace the idea of divorce, expressing, "We'll still be a family." He happily cuddled our pet dog, affectionately referring to him as his little brother, despite the dog being older. With resolve, I began preparations for the divorce. Firstly, I promptly contacted a lawyer who was a friend of my father, arranging to meet the following day. That night, Martin slept with my father and the dog, their faint laughter bringing me comfort as I lay in bed with my mother, reminiscing about my childhood. The next morning, upon checking my smartphone, I found over 200 missed calls and messages from Kevin, reflecting his emotional turmoil. Just the sight of it drained me, prompting me to switch off my phone once more. Today, I met with the lawyer, discussing the details and confirming my decision to divorce. We finalized the paperwork, and the lawyer will meet with Kevin tomorrow to proceed. After some time, the lawyer visited my parents' house to discuss the situation. It turned out that Jane had accrued a substantial debt from gambling and excessive shopping, with Kevin serving as her guarantor. When Jane couldn't make the repayments, they devised a plan to tap into my savings. Now, Kevin wants me and Martin back and is retracting his desire for a divorce, the lawyer explained. However, the divorce papers I had submitted earlier had already been processed. When asked if this meant the divorce was finalized, the lawyer confirmed it, stating, "Yes, it's been accepted." Kevin appeared to break down, expressing his fear of losing me to another man. Despite his emotional plea, knowing that everything was settled brought me a sense of peace. I anticipated arguments over child support, but Kevin even pledged to pay $340 to support Martin every month. Later, Kevin called me. Feeling relieved after the divorce proceedings, I decided to speak with him briefly. His tone was no longer aggressive. Instead, he spoke calmly. He confessed that he believed keeping me financially dependent would prevent me from seeking a divorce. He also acknowledged his tendency to spoil his younger sister, Jane, as a misguided form of sibling love. He admitted feeling jealous of Martin, fearing he had lost me to our son. "Once I've resolved Jane's debts, I'll come back for you. Please don't remarry until then," he pleaded. However, I firmly reiterated that I no longer loved him and wouldn't reconsider our relationship. Before hanging up, I could hear him sobbing softly as he whispered, "Please be happy." Did I manage to stay strong until the end? Discussing future plans with my parents, I decided to remain at their house until Martin grows up, and he transferred to a different nursery. Returning to my role as company president, I explained the situation to my colleagues. Later, I learned that Kevin and Jane had disclosed the divorce and their debt to their parents, resulting in their disannulment. More than the financial issues, their parents were incensed about never seeing their grandson again. Now, Kevin and Jane, once close, reside in a modest apartment, constantly blaming each other. Their actions have led to their own downfall. Today, I find happiness in being with my family.